I was sitting on those chords for years, and it just sounded like shit on every other tone I used. But then I came up with this really unique organ, and all of a sudden, this chord progression that I was sitting on for years, it came to life. And I'm like, okay, finally we can roll this out.
And we're on. Welcome everybody to another episode of the Last Week Liquid podcast. Today I have the pleasure of sitting down with Greg, better known as Submorphics. Greg is an American drum and bass producer, currently residing in the Netherlands, with releases on the likes of Shogun, Hospital and Metalheads. 2020 saw him release his debut album, Kodak Dreams, on the North Quarter, which he followed up in 2021 with his beautiful, nostalgic yet forward-thinking EP, Newport Magnetic. Greg, welcome to the show. How are you doing?
I'm good, man. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, my pleasure. Was a long time coming. We rescheduled a few times.
Yeah, man. Sorry for having to reschedule several times, but life has gotten a little bit weird.
Yeah.
I just got back from the US about 6 days ago. I was there much longer than I thought I would be, dealing with a lot of bullshit.
Okay.
Helping my father move to New York as well. So big up to my dad. Good luck. If you're listening to this.
Yeah.
He probably isn't, but good luck all the same. I played a couple socially distanced shows in California, and even playing to about 50 people, I caught a little bit of the vibe of what things were like, pre-COVID and what they will be like again post-COVID. But I honestly felt like I was a little overwhelmed. So I'm glad they were only just these small shows, because I just needed them as sort of like a way to refamiliarize myself with the intensity of a drum and bass show. And I feel like we really, as a genre, we have the most intense shows sometimes. Even when you're playing like some wimpy liquid tunes like I tend to do. No, I play tunes that have balls, I think.
Yeah, nobody said wimpy.
Yeah. No, not at all. But rolling out these 2-hour sets in LA and San Francisco really was the highlight of my trip just now. And now that I'm back in the Netherlands, things are pretty low key here. There's no nightlife. Masks are only required on public transportation, so there's been a little bit of progress. But it's a pretty quiet life here. I'm in The Hague. I'm not in Amsterdam.
Okay.
So I'm in this sort of a residential part of the city, and it's partly urban, but mostly residential and quiet. But the quiet vibe helps me in the studio and just tune out the outside world and not be too distracted by party things. And during COVID, it's been a pretty low-key life here. If I was younger, I would probably hate it, but I'm a little bit older.
Perfect.
Perfect. Well, not perfect, but I really don't mind. I consider myself 75% introvert, 25% extrovert. I don't know. That sounds like I took a BuzzFeed quiz or something. That's just my own self-assessment. So I'm not really getting the extroverted side of myself. Has not really been getting much at the moment, but just educating myself about old music I never heard, getting back into guitar, and I've bought 1 million pedals.
Oh, nice.
Writing a lot of hip hop now that my Newport Magnetic EP is out. Just needed to take a little break from drum and bass. And now that I'm back in the studio, it's time for me to roll out some drum and bass, but sometimes I need to take breaks.
Yeah, no.
So, but overall, life is okay, I guess. It's not amazing. It's not terrible.
Yeah. I can definitely relate to what you said on the introvert extrovert side. I'm very similar, I think. And definitely what you said on living in a very residential area. I've mentioned this in previous episodes. I used to live in Hong Kong for 2 years. Super hectic, busy, noisy, a lot of activity all the time. And I moved this year. So the last 2 years were in Hong Kong. This year I moved to Dublin, a very residential neighborhood outside of the city center, and it's perfect. It's exactly what I was looking for. Sometimes you need those, I don't know, experience I'm not. I'm going on 30, but I would consider myself kind of after the full-on party era of my life, and I don't know, it just feels good at this time in my life, at least.
Yeah, I think it's good. Like if you're living in Dublin, it's sort of like Dublin is such a chill vibe, but like I like the idea of living somewhere residential, but I can get to a bigger part of the city center or something. Like I'm only 2 kilometers north of Den Haag city center, so if I want to go out and have fun post-COVID or pre-COVID, it's always an option. But then I come back home and it's back to the quiet vibe. So perfect.
Tell me about those shows in the US, because you said they were kind of the perfect size to kind of get back into it. Like before going on stage, because it was a year and a half more, I don't know, before your last set, were you feeling a bit of that anxiety you felt when you were like starting as a DJ, or maybe not to that point? Or
a little bit, like a little hint of anxiety, but mostly when you're playing to such a small crowd and you know all the faces that you see out there, it was just pure excitement. Because also there's been a lot of beautiful music that's been released during COVID. A lot of it on the label that I work with, the North Quarter, and I had never heard it outside of my apartment, so I was just excited to hear the tracks. But basically, I played at Respect Los Angeles. They had a thing called Dinner and Bass. And it was very low key. It was just sort of the perfect way to start DJing again. And then I played in San Francisco at my former residency, which was Stamina Sundays. And it was more like 50 people were there, which is still like 25% capacity. And they weren't so strict with the rules. So people were dancing and people were drunk and having a good time. And like I said, even though it was only 50 people, it felt like there were 200 people in there. Cheering during the breakdowns and stuff. And like when I looked back on Instagram the next day, none of the videos made it look very exciting. So I didn't actually share any of those videos. Hope that isn't being an asshole. But no, it was such a vibe. I was buzzing off of it for days. And speaking of Hong Kong, my buddy Dan Stizo is living there. Okay. I just talked to him. He just invited me out. I've never actually been to Hong Kong. So if I wanted to go, I don't know what the COVID rules are. If I wanted to go, that's always an option. I really need to get out to that part of the world.
Yeah, it's a crazy part, definitely. I think they're one of the strictest in terms of COVID. They had the other SARS virus 10 years ago.
That's right.
So I remember actually when COVID started, my wife and I, we were in Hong Kong, and we came back in Belgium, where we're from, in January 2020, end of January. So that was when it was everything was kind of starting, and everybody in Belgium was asking us, "Are you sure you want to go back to Hong Kong? Because it's over there, it's happening over there." And 2 months later, entirety of Europe was in lockdown and everything. It was it was crazy. But when I got back to Hong Kong in the middle of the pandemic, you had your electronic bracelet and you had to stay indoors, and they were checking with an app that you were actually staying indoors, and it was nuts, quarantine in a hotel and all of that. I'm not sure what's the state today, but I'm pretty sure you might need to wait a few months still.
Yeah, I'll probably just stay in the Netherlands. Did you say you're from Belgium?
Yeah. I'm half Belgian, half Irish, but I've grew up and lived in Belgium most of my life. Yeah.
What part of Belgium?
It's a small
South
town
in the north.
No, it's the Brussels. So,
Brussels. So you were speaking French.
Yeah, and I'm actually from a town called Waterloo, which is 20 minutes south of Brussels. But I usually say Brussels because
Okay. But, so you didn't speak Dutch while you were growing up in Brussels?
No. I learned Dutch at school like most people.
Okay.
Well, you have to, because it's one of the national languages, but I haven't spoken Dutch in many years. Many years, unfortunately. Did you pick up any Dutch since you...
Yeah, during COVID, I actually started taking Dutch courses. Started in person, and then it switched over to Zoom, which was slightly awkward, connection issues.
Yeah, I can imagine.
I hadn't been in school or university in any kind since like 2007. So I was feeling a little bit of anxiety about being back in school, but there's no reason to be. It's all, for my own self-education. And there were no grades. And I'm happy to say I passed level 2 out of 6 today of 6. But my Dutch is very mediocre at best. So now that I'm back, I'm really trying to get it to a higher level because I think it's a beautiful language. Like some people think it's really ugly, but I think it's pretty. So.
Yeah. There's something about speaking, even if it's very elementary, like basic sentences, but when you're in a country and you can speak their language and you're making an effort. I've noticed when I travel, or I did an exchange program in Taiwan and they were teaching me a bit of Chinese. When you can say like one sentence in Chinese, they go crazy. Like it's,
and I feel just appreciate the effort.
Exactly. Yeah. So even if it's still basic level, I think it's really important to try and learn the language as much as possible.
Well, during COVID, my social life isn't amazing, but when I go out to the supermarkets and restaurants, I try to only speak Dutch until they get fed up with me and switch over to English. Because as you know, everybody here speaks English.
Yeah.
But I'm so proud of myself when I go out and I only speak in Dutch and they understand me perfectly well. It's funny though, like in The Hague, they understand my Dutch perfectly well, but then I went to Antwerp and I tried to speak Dutch there and they would not have
completely different.
Yeah, they didn't. It's like more like a Flemish version of it. They didn't understand a word of what I was saying, and they're just like, "Just speak English, man." Fine, I was just trying. But
yeah, and their English is perfect. Like in the Dutch area of Belgium, their English is perfect, way better than in the south part. But but even in Belgium, like the north part is Dutch speaking, and like between regions within that region, their Dutch is completely different. Like the accents and the words and all of that. It's crazy, like but
I'm a big fan of Belgium, so I need to get back there. I've never actually had a gig there.
Oh, really?
I just did a radio show for Studio Brussels.
Yeah.
So I'm hoping that. Okay, cool. Yeah, I'm hoping that will like help me to raise the Belgian population's awareness of me or whatever. Star Wars would be sick. So if you're listening to this, Star Wars, have me down, please.
Yeah, it's crazy. There's quite a few, like maybe not as much as obviously the UK or the Netherlands, but there's quite a few events in Brussels, in Belgium, I mean, in terms of drum and bass.
Yeah, so big up Belgian crew.
Make it happen.
Yeah, the Bretchen boys live there. My boy Phase, Phase, lives there. Yeah, they got a good scene from what I can tell. I've never really partied there. I've only done the typical touristy things.
Yeah.
Anyway,
so, talking about the Netherlands, so I'm slightly ashamed of this, but I knew your music just from the music. I had no idea you were American before doing a bit of research, and I was amazed to see like Detroit, Chicago, California, now Europe. Tell me the story. What's that about?
So I grew up in Michigan in the Detroit suburbs. Sort of like went to university in the early 2000s. So I just missed the first wave of Detroit techno. By the time I was going to raves in like the early 2000s, it was sort of like all the typical Detroit techno legends that you think of, like Derek May and Carl Craig and Kevin Saunderson. A lot of them had moved to Berlin. So honestly, the electronic music that I got into first was not dance music. It was sort of like Aphex Twin and Boards of Canada and Warp Records sort of things. And I was also a hip hop head. I was into, Wu-Tang and The Roots and Mos Def and that sort of thing. And I got into dance music through deep and jazzy house and sort of like broken beat sort of things. So when I started DJing, I was buying all sorts of genres, and I didn't really have a sense of like that I wanted to stick to one genre. I was in terms of drum and bass, I was into LTJ Bookham and the whole Good Looking Records thing, but I thought it was more like home listening sort of stuff. Eventually, a friend of mine took me to see Bookham and Conrad, and I just loved it. Like the musicality and the soul and the atmospherics and the vocals. I thought it needed something more though. I don't know. But then like a couple months later, I went and saw Ed Rush and Optical in Canada at like a massive festival called WEMF, which is like World Electronic Music Festival, like in a field outside of Toronto. And I absolutely loved the energy of that Ed Rush and Optical set. It didn't quite speak to me musically like the Bookham stuff, but the energy and the funk and everything and rhyme time on the mic, I thought it was sick. So I thought to myself, if there was a combination of these two things, sort of like the musicality of the Bookham stuff and the like dance floor funk of the Ed Rush and Optical stuff, if you could combine them, I thought that would be what I wanted to DJ. And I was already producing, but it wasn't really dance music. I was just kind of, I come from bands and I play piano and guitars and stuff. Sorry, this is a really long-winded response.
No, go for it.
Like, I'm just trying to explain that my first years were in Detroit and there was no drum and bass scene there. I had to drive out to Chicago or Toronto to experience any drum and bass. So once I finally graduated from university, which would have been around like 2007, I thought it's time to leave Detroit because there's the music that I love, drum and bass. There's nothing like that here. And Chicago at the time in the mid 2000s was probably one of the best spots for drum and bass, also house music and hip hop and all sorts of things. So even though Detroit is this legendary electronic music town, it just wasn't the right fit for me. And a lot of my friends had moved on. So I was like, let's try moving to Chicago and living in an actual city, because I wasn't living in a city in Michigan. I was sort of living on a lake and just like a quiet existence. So living in Chicago was my first real like urban living situation. So I lived there for 5 years. Still have a lot of great friends there. Like one of my best friends, Christine Tamayo, is there, and we've done about a dozen tunes together. So I'm always going back to Chicago whenever I'm in the States, because it's sort of like, I consider it one of my homes. But I would say that like around 2013, the drum and bass scene was absolutely gone. It was all dubstep and EDM and stuff. And so my own recording career was starting to take off a bit. And I thought, let's try moving to California, because no matter what genre or type of arts you're into, like I just felt like it's an overgeneralization, but I always just felt that the arts were more appreciated in California compared to the rest of the country. And I just wanted to live somewhere warm and beautiful. And
yeah.
So I packed up my car and I moved to San Francisco. And I lived there for 5 years. I lived in Chicago for 5 years and then San Francisco for 5 years. And I guess I'm a bit nomadic because I just had this idea in my head. It's time to move to Europe now, because I've tried all these different parts of America. And to be honest, none of them quite fit. Like,
why is that?
I don't know. Like, I just feel like an outsider everywhere in America. Obviously, I'm an outsider here as well.
Yeah.
I just think it's beautiful being able to get anywhere in Europe within an hour and go to London every weekend if I'm gigging there. And like, there's honestly like a million more places to play in Europe than in America. In America, there's like 5 real cities for drum and bass. Some people would disagree with that, but there's all these like little micro scenes. When people ask me like about the US drum and bass scene, I never know what to say, because it's such a big country and there's like all these little patches of like little mini scenes, but in my mind, there's not like a real connection between any of them. So I wasn't really playing out as often as I would like to. And honestly, I love DJing so much, and I signed an ESP agency in London. I was like, let's try moving to the Netherlands. Like, that's where my label is. It's a beautiful country. They have legal weed there, good food. Here in The Hague, I'm like 3 kilometers east of the beach. So it's kind of similar to California in that regard. But just the idea of traveling around Europe every weekend appealed to me. And also, there's this thing called a Dutch-American Friendship Treaty, which allows you to move from America to the Netherlands very easily.
Oh, nice. I didn't know that.
Just declared myself as self-employed, and as long as you pay taxes and get a Dutch accountant, get a Dutch bank account as well, then they end up approving just about anybody.
Oh, nice.
So it's not really as easy as for an American to move to the UK, as far as I'm aware, if you're not a student or you're not like, you don't have a real work sponsor. But as a self-employed person, I was able to move to the Netherlands very easily. So I got a 2-year residence permit. Honestly, I got it about 6 months before COVID kicked in. So in that regard, I do feel sorry for myself because most of my time here in the Netherlands has been during COVID. But so that residence permit will expire at the end of this year. And assuming that things get a little bit back to normal with the gigging and the nightlife, I think I'm going to renew it for another 2 years. But yeah, I'm just kind of weird like that. I'm nomadic. I lived places for 5 years and then I moved to the next place. But everywhere that I've ever lived, I consider a home. Like when I go back to San Francisco, it feels like my home. Michigan, Detroit is my primary home. Yeah. Obviously, I don't have as many friends or family there anymore, but it still feels like my home. Chicago as well. So I don't know. I don't know what the future holds for me, but it looks like I'll be staying here another 2 years, basically.
Nice. Where do you think that travel bug like comes from? Were you like traveling a lot as a kid on vacation and seeing a lot of places, or like where does that need to move every 5 years? Because I can foresee in like 3-4 years you'll probably leave the Netherlands.
Good question. I don't know, because as a kid I didn't travel that much outside of America and Canada, so I never really left North America until I was in my 20s. And something about just being out on my own with just a backpack traveling the world, it just appeals to me. Like, and I'm really fortunate that I've been able to go to a lot of places that I'd never even heard of until I started DJing. Like, I've been all over Romania and Macedonia and Serbia and like smaller towns in Sweden and like smaller towns in Germany, places I've never even heard of. And I just feel alive when I'm out in the world with just my backpack and like meeting new people. And like the drum and bass scene is so beautiful that like you're going to meet cool people everywhere you go, like that you're going to be able to relate to. So I don't know, like I'm just a travel junkie. There's so many places I still have never been though. I've never been to Australia or New Zealand. I've never been to Asia. I've never been to South America. So I need to scratch my travel itch, as it were, more in this post-COVID world, if we ever get to that point.
Do you have a place that you visited while DJing where you thought, oh yeah, I'd like to like live here at some point?
I really like the north of England more than the south of England, and I liked Wales as well. I like Berlin quite a bit. When I go to Berlin, I end up staying for like 2 weeks, just because I have friends there who I can couch surf from couch to couch, and I just love the way they live their lives there. It's a little bit intense, so I have to leave eventually because the way they party there, I can keep up a little bit, but then I'm just like, no, I need to need to go and not drink every night, you know, because like I don't know, I can't keep up with them after about 2 weeks. But I really do love Germany. I'm Jewish. I'm not really religious, but like I am like ethnically Jewish. So like growing up, you sort of have this idea about Germany. But like, every time I go to Germany, I have a beautiful time. And I think that much like California, I don't know if this is a good comparison at all, but I feel that the arts are really valued there.
I was going to say that, within Europe, Berlin is really well known for its like artistic side and very open, like any form of arts, very open-minded, very experimental, all of that.
So I had a buddy who was he had like a residency at Panorama Bar above Berghain. And so like, I don't think I was cool enough to get into it, but because I was going with him, I could get in all the time. And like, people might not know this about me, but like, I really do love a bit of techno and house music. and sort of like hot flush style dubstep from like 10 years ago. So like I really love to take a break from drum and bass all I can, and take in other styles, other genres. So from that perspective, I love Berlin and just all the little small towns that I visit when I'm in Germany.
Yeah. So this might be probably an impossible question to answer, but like coming from around Detroit, do you think if you were born like 5-10 years earlier, you might have been into techno and not drum and bass?
Well, I would have experienced it in a completely different way. A bit of melodic techno probably would have spoken to me. As an artist, I think that I was drawn to drum and bass more than other genres because I'm really like, I'm partial to chords and melodies and like soul music and jazz and funk, and like you can't really get away with those influences as much in techno. I mean, there is quite a bit of great melodic techno, but in terms of what I want to do, like before I was making dance music, I was writing songs with a vocalist friend of mine, and I played in sort of like indie bands when I was like 15, 16 years old. So getting into electronic music, I was always going to be more leaning towards the melodic stuff. But I think you're right. If I had been born like 5 years earlier, I might have gotten in more into like the techno and house side of things and tried to be more melodic with it. But I like a bit of like sound designy, unmelodic techno with like cool bass as well. So like I'm not all purely a melodic person. Like my music is mostly melodic. I don't think I've ever released anything with like a one note bass line or anything. As a DJ, I play some of that stuff, but as an artist, everything I do, I just want to flex the melodic side of things. So
yeah. Well, it could have been an interesting experiment, like having like chords in techno.
Yeah.
It's never too late to try it. Maybe there's a hidden treasure in there to explore.
Honestly, I'm not good at 4 on the floor music, like producing it. Like I've tried to make a little bit of like melodic disco and soulful house, and I haven't released any of it because it's very mediocre. I don't feel that I would be adding anything to that world by putting out stuff that's so mediocre. But like that goes without saying, I don't put out my mediocre drum and bass either.
Yeah, no, obviously.
And trust me, I do make mediocre drum and bass.
Yeah, I mean, everybody, like, it's like most top artists release like 5% maybe of the tracks they write at most. So it's, I don't know, it's a common theme. But I'm always curious. I've spoken to a few American producers. We were talking about Echo Brown before we started recording, and I'm always curious for American producers what really attracted them to drum and bass and what made them persist with drum and bass, because it's such a like you know it is better than myself, but it's just such a less popular genre than a lot of other stuff. Like what attracted you first, and then what kind of kept you going despite, as you said, gigs being quite small and all of that?
I just thought that drum and bass was a good vehicle for this sort of like epic musical futuristic. To me, it was like future hip hop. Like when I saw Bookham and Conrad, Ed Rush and Optical, and Rhyme Time, it just made sense to me with the MC and just like this futuristic weird music, like that was only appealing to like a very select group of people, but like the vibe, like I just never saw anything like it. And like I just got hooked. Like I was really into Caliber and the really high contrast stuff and Marcus Intellects and SD Files, and like somewhere in the early to mid 2000s I just became absolutely obsessed with like making my mark on the genre. And I don't know, I just sort of had tunnel vision about it. And like I feel like for about 4 or 5 years I only listened to drum and bass, and then I got back into hip hop. Obviously I like a bit of soul and funk and samples and stuff. And so I don't know, I like around 2006, 2007, that's when my first releases were coming out. and I finally started to travel. And then I came to Europe for the first time, and I got like thrown in right at the deep end because I remember I played a gig in Leiden here in the Netherlands, a night called Fever, which was run by Lenzman and Dan Stizo. And like in America, I was used to playing to like 50 people at most. And then I got the first gig I ever played in Europe. There must have been 600, 700 people there. And they got me really high. I was stoned out of my mind in the Netherlands. And all of a sudden I nearly had a panic attack because I was about to play to like 600 more people than I had ever played before.
Oh, you got stoned before playing the...
Yeah, I got really high before because I was hanging out with Zula, artificial intelligence, and he rolled me one, and I probably shouldn't have smoked it, but it's sort of like when you have like a lot of anxiety at a gig where you're overwhelmed. Yeah. Just sort of play the first couple tunes, take it easy, and like it's not like you're playing like Beethoven on a harpsichord out there. You're just pressing play on some CD. Yeah. So within 5 to 10 minutes, I got comfortable, and it was amazing. And then on that first trip to Europe, I also was playing in Serbia, Macedonia, a few things in London. I forget what else, but like it was just completely eye-opening for me that like this music that I thought was super niche was actually less niche than I thought. And like the fact that I had waited to come to Europe until I had a few records out meant that I got this like amazing first experience in Europe. And so after that, I would come every year and stay for about 6 weeks and just try and fit in as much as I could in those 6 weeks. And then eventually around 2017, I came out here and I stayed for about 4 months. And I learned the hard way, you're only allowed to stay for 90 days in the EU. So I had to leave prematurely and I had to cancel all these gigs.
I didn't know that.
And I had problems at Heathrow as well, because they finally picked up on the fact that I had been playing all these DJ gigs without a permit, without a work permit. So I had to cancel 3 or 4 gigs. It was very embarrassing. Nobody was mad at me, and we ended up I ended up doing makeup gigs for all those promoters. But it was like a really hard lesson that like I could no longer DJ in the UK without a work permit, and I could never stay in the EU for more than 90 days. So I went back to America, researched how to get into the UK with a work permit, and figured out that I could actually move to the Netherlands and stay a lot longer than 90 days. So I came back in 2018 with all this new knowledge, and I got into the UK without any problems this time because I had a work permit, and I should have probably gotten a lawyer to help me with the Dutch residence permit stuff. I thought I could just do it all on my own. And I'm way out of my depth to do that, but I ended up figuring it out after like 6 months of like applying and them rejecting me. Eventually they just accepted my application because they realized that I was just going to keep applying. Yeah. I think if I had done it correctly the first time, like basically just gotten a Dutch accountant to help me with everything, then I wouldn't have had the stress. But it was really like one of the most exciting things in my life when I got this Dutch residence permit allowing me to stay here for 2 years, because my experience prior to that was that I could only stay for 90 days. Yeah. And I just feel so fortunate that I live in this amazing city where like I can get to Amsterdam in like 30 to 40 minutes. I can walk to some of the best museums in the world, look at Dutch paintings from like 500 years ago. The food here is great. The architecture is great. Like, just like coming from America, it feels exotic to me. Even though I've lived here for 3 years now, I still just feel so fortunate to live in this beautiful place. So I was talking on the previous episode with Flo Anastasia. She's from Canada, and she was saying pretty much the same thing. The first time she came to Europe, she was like, "Oh, all these monuments and all these churches and cathedrals." And exactly. Like, I'm not a religious person. I'm tolerant. Like, I'm open-minded about everything. But I like going and checking out these old churches and hearing the the organs from hundreds of years ago and the bells filling the entire city. Like, to Europeans, I probably sound really corny right now, but like, coming from America, we don't really have, well, we've wiped out all the Native American history. And so like, we don't really have anything that goes back further than like 100 years in the places I've lived. So like, just being able to walk to a church that was built like in the 13th century, it just blows my mind. And like, you know, like it's just gezellig, as they say.
Yep, that's the word.
Yeah, just like hearing the church bells at night, like 10 p.m. and it fills the entire city. It just puts me at peace for some reason. So yeah, big up the Netherlands.
Yeah. Talk about like the past and nostalgia. I guess it's a good segue into Kodak Dreams. I do want to talk about it. So that was your debut album. I saw somebody saying on a Q&A you did on the North Quarter Facebook group, why did you take 15 years to release your first album? Yeah, so how did you look back on that experience now, like a year later, releasing your first, writing it and releasing it? How do you look back on that experience?
Yeah, so I feel like the reason that it took so long to do a full-length album is because I've worked with I think I've worked with about 28 different record labels, and it's usually just a one-off, and I never felt like any one of them was my home. And before the North Quarter existed, I was working with Friction at Shogun, and I was doing some things with V Recordings, and like it was almost the right fit, but I never felt that like I was being invested in as like a long-term artist. And I've known Taya Lenzman since the early days of my recording career. We've always been friends. We both started out on Spearhead Records, and we've done like 6 or 7 tunes together over the years. We've traded ideas all this time, and I trust his take on my music, and like I like the back and forth that we have, and like I'd never had a relationship with a label like I had with North Quarter prior to this. And so I did the Detroit Haze EP, which is sort of like a mini album prior to Kodak Dreams. And it allowed me to do some hip hop and like explore with some vocal tracks and just do like a longer project. And like coming from like as a real musician, like I always felt that longer albums were like a real artistic statement. Whereas like, I mean, not to say that EPs and singles aren't as well, but like you can really take a listener on a journey on a full length album in a way that you can't on an EP, where like you're just trying to bang it out, like 4 bangers or whatever.
Yeah.
I feel like there's different sides of my sound, even though I'm generally melodic with whatever I do feel that there's some more subtle elements to my sound. Also, I do other genres, like there's a track on Kodak Dreams, which is 140 BPM called Find a Reason. There's 3 hip hop tunes on there, and there's all these interludes.
Yeah.
Like I'm a fan of Madlib and J Dilla and DJ Shadow and all these things where like these little 45-second interludes really tie in the project together. So I really wanted to do an album on the North Quarter, and how it really works is that I just sort of fill a folder of tunes on Dropbox. Me and Lenzman, we both have access to it. And I just filled that folder with about 30 different sketches. Not even like fully finished tunes, just sort of like, some of them are just sketches and some of them are more developed than others. But I mean, we narrowed it down to 14 or 15 of them. So it's like, yep, we're doing an album now. So I did sort of want to sum up my sound in like a more modern way, try and update the drums a bit and the mix downs and the sound design, but really just focus on like the things that I've always loved, like funk and soul, and my own way of chopping up samples, but also adding my own keys and guitar and a lot of my own synthesis, trying to like connect the worlds of sample based with my own my own production, my own keys. I play piano and keys. So with Kodak Dreams, it was just sort of trying to sum up my own sound in a 2018 way. And I ended up putting about 18 months into it, because once all the tunes were selected, then we had to get them to like a really polished place. Because with the North Quarter, Lenzman really likes all of our output to be as polished as possible. So with Kodak Dreams, I was just trying to sum up my sound as best as I could, with like sample based and more like my own synthesis, my own playing. And the interludes really tied it all together. And the theme of Kodak Dreams was basically that I discovered all these photos from my childhood in Detroit when I visited my parents' house, and I brought them back to the Netherlands. And a lot of them are like me with like an old boombox and like listening to 90s hip hop and stuff. And like I basically spread all these photos around my apartment, and they sort of inspired the sessions, but also they were seeping into my dreams as well. So that's what the title means, is like these photos were in my dreams, and then I would wake up the next day with this vibe in my head. And I'm the sort of guy where I just wake up in the morning, I make coffee, and I get straight down to work. When I was younger, I was like a nocturnal producer, but now I'm like, I wake up and I do all my work in the morning and early afternoon. And so like I would always have these dreams in my head from the previous night. And a lot of them had to do with these old photos. And like, and then all the interludes were basically describing photos from my own childhood as well as my parents' childhood. And cause like there's a lot of 60s and 70s retro vibes before I was born on the album. So yeah, with the interludes, I was just trying to describe my past, basically.
Yeah. Tell me about the girl who speaks on your album, because she's also, if I'm not mistaken, it's the same voice in the intro of your Newport Magnetic. Her voice is like perfect for your style of music. I find it's like you just want to lie down and and just chill out.
Yes, so that's Christina Tamayo, who I mentioned earlier. She's from Chicago. She's also a singer.
Okay.
And we had done 3 tunes on SG Unlimited and like 1 tune on Good Looking. She's a beautiful singer, but also she did like some Spotify adverts for the North Quarter. And then we figured out that she's got this like radio voice.
Yeah.
And so with Kodak Dreams, me and Lenzman decided, what if we had like a tribute to Tribe Called Quest's Midnight Marauder, which was like, starts with this narration. And so I basically hired her to narrate my album for me. And then, like you said, with the opening to Newport Magnetic, track called Botanical Life, I had sampled a yoga podcast.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Or actually, it was like a podcast called, I forget what the name is. It's basically like bedtime stories for adults.
Okay, yeah.
So I sampled that, but I was like, why don't we just get Christina to recreate that so it's more my own?
Yeah.
So I thought it was just a cool concept to say, like, put away your phone. Like,
I love that. And like we can get into that EP afterwards, because I absolutely love it. But yeah, there's something in her voice that's very meditative, very appeasing and soothing. And yeah, I love the fact that you used her again for the EP, because it kind of pulls a thread between your album and your EP, which I really like when there's that kind of common thread between releases.
Yeah, thank you. I hope other people picked up on that. I think it's more of a subtle point, but yeah, just the consistency and like sort of like here's the next episode of that. Although I wasn't describing photos anymore. And I mean, we can talk about Newport Magnetic, but with that one, I tried to have it more like a modern, it's still very nostalgic, I think, but I tried to have more modern sound design, modern drums. Yeah. I had worked with Paula and Bryson and Sattel on some collaborations, and they're a bit younger than me, and I just learned some new tricks, and I just wanted to apply it to my own music. And that track Albion Road that I did with Paula and Bryson was like kind of a big hit in the North Quarter world. And so Lenzman was like, that's the future of your sound right there. So I tried to make something that was more forward thinking in terms of sound design. Melodically, it's still very much me, and
Yeah.
I'm a nostalgic person, so I'm always throwing in jazz chords and licks and such. But I just tried to make something a bit more modern and forward thinking with Newport Magnetic. And it's just it's just an EP this time, so it doesn't necessarily have the bigger theme that Kodak Dreams had. But maybe in a sense it does have a theme, and I'm just not picking up on what it is.
Yeah, or maybe people can pick it up for themselves.
Yeah,
that's what I like.
Leave it open to interpretation. That's what I like to do.
Yeah, yeah.
And even Kodak Dreams, I like to leave that a little bit up to interpretation, because it means something very specific to me. But I don't want to like literally say what it means, because it makes it more special for other people when they have their own like interpretation of what it means to them. So.
Yeah, no, definitely. Yeah, it's something I picked up. I think you mentioned it in an interview, but definitely something I picked up on while listening back to your catalog before this chat is like the balance between, and especially on your latest EP, the balance between modern sound but very nostalgic, past looking elements and aesthetics. So is that something like you were consciously doing for this EP? It was something you were kind of striving for, to find that balance between the two, or did it come naturally?
I think the melodic aspect of it just comes naturally to me. Like I do what I do, and like I like what I like. So like what I was trying to do a bit more deliberately was like, to nerd out a little bit, I used Omnisphere and like addictive keys, less like retro synths, more modern synthesis. And I'd gotten some drums from Saddle and Polo and Bryson and some various producers. I had like a little Jarrah and Stone collaboration that we didn't end up finishing, but I think I used some drums from that, and just trying to update the drums a bit and like use some more modern VST synths rather than retro stuff. But musically, I'm gonna do regardless. Like I can't do anything else but like what speaks to me. So there's certain chords that just speak to me, you know. It can be difficult. Like right now, like I'm always writing sketches, and like sometimes I'm just like, I've used these same chords like a million times. Like how do I move forward in a way that's like sounds like me but is not me? But so it's always sort of like an inner dialogue I've got going on where I want to move forward, but there's just certain chords that just speak to me. But then sometimes I realize I'm overthinking it. Like if something works, it works. Sometimes the simplest ideas work the best. So so sometimes like I just lay down a sketch, and if I'm not sure about it, I just let it sit, come back to it 2 weeks later with fresh ears. I'm like, this is very simple, but it works. And like I don't have the luxury of not finishing something. If something works, I feel like I have the obligation to finish it and release it, because I mean, quite frankly, I write a lot of tunes that don't work, and the public doesn't ever hear those ones. But when I come up with something that works, I feel like I have the obligation to finish it and release it.
Yeah, definitely. About like, I know there's a million tracks that I love that are like just your 4 basic chords that have been used a million times. And there's just something about them that still works. And I was actually reflecting on this a few days ago. I was listening to, I don't know if you heard it, Paul and Bryson's single Under.
It's beautiful.
Yeah, it's amazing. Like I heard those chords on piano. I was like, what are these chords? So I went to my piano and I was finding the chords, and it was like A minor, D or something. Like nothing like the most used chords ever, but it works so well. I don't know, I find it amazing sometimes, like there's only like 12 notes and you can still come up with all these new emotions, and I don't know, it's fascinating.
The additional melodies on top of the chords that make it unique. I'd say that undertune is a good example. Like you said, it's a really, I don't know if it's cliched, but like those chords have been used probably a lot of times before, but just like the additional melodies and the sound design, and like honestly, like if you come up with a good sound, like a good tone on a synth, then tunes can write themselves. Like, it's just like, okay, this is a cool synth patch that I've slightly altered to make my own. Certain chords just work really well on this. And like, you could take those same chords and use it on a different synth patch and it would sound absolutely shit. Like, for example, I have this tune Weather It Out, which is on my first North Quarter EP, on the Detroit Haze EP. And I was sitting on those chords for years, and it just sounded like shit on every other tone I used. But then I came up with this really unique organ, and all of a sudden this chord progression that I was sitting on for years, it came to life. And I'm like, okay, finally we can roll this out because it sounds not corny with this tone.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah, that's really cool. So you generally start with a patch and then you write chords based on what the sound inspires you, and not the other way around.
Yeah, that's exactly right. A lot of people start with drums, and I think that's probably a good way of working, like getting the groove right, and then the music can write itself. But for me and my tunes, like, they don't work if they don't have that, like the core musical idea, if that's not in place. So I always start with the chords first, and then a melody and a bass line, and then I write the drums to it. So
yeah. I mean, it's different for everybody. That's some people start with, I don't know, maybe the bass, and a lot of people do it last.
Started with bass.
So it really depends. We mentioned it in passing, but I do want to talk about Botanical Life because that's my favorite of the EP. I love that track and the melody that comes in and the voice, and it evokes a lot of things in me when I listen to it. And I think I heard you say in an interview that it's the one you were maybe a bit unsure about on the EP, and you weren't quite sure that it really fit on the EP or something. I was just curious on your take on that track, if you remember writing it or.
Yeah. So during COVID, had a lot of time to myself, and I would always go down these YouTube rabbit holes. And a friend of mine from Hong Kong actually was staying, crashing with me, and we were listening to a lot of like DJ Crush mixes, like from the late 90s, sort of like this trip hop vibe. And I just heard this tune. I'm not even going to mention what it is because it's like a trip hop tune from the 90s. And I just started playing along with it on the roads, and I came up with this whole arrangement of my own. And I didn't want to sample that tune because I don't tend to sample things from my own lifetime. Okay. I tend to sample things from before I was born. And so I came up with this idea of just jamming along with this trip hop tune. And then the original version of Botanical Life had this really minimal, sort of like around 2010 on Solar, everybody had these like really little claps and like really minimal beats. And so that was the original drums to Botanical Life, but with all the music that I had written inspired by this trip hop tune. And so in the Newport Magnetic sessions, I had written about 19 sketches, and that was one of them. And it was one of the more left field, subtle ideas that I had come up with. But Lenzman was like, nope, that's sick right there. Like, we have to use that one. I'm like, yep, I do like this one. I was just surprised because I thought it was a little bit less obvious. But I was happy to use it because I wouldn't have put it in our folder if I wasn't happy with it. But I ended up beefing up the drums a bit and making them more modern. And we tried it as a vocal tune with some singing over it. But we were like, no, it's cool. It's just like an instrumental. And then I threw in that sample from the Bedtime for Adults podcast. And all of a sudden, it's just like, this is really unique. Let's use this. And yeah, it's just like melodically, I thought it was strong. The bass line worked. So like, yeah, it made the cut basically.
Yeah. It's funny that you feel it's more of a left field track, because for me
it might not be.
No, but it's like your perspective writing it versus my perspective listening to it. I feel it fits perfectly in your catalog and in that EP, for example. So it's interesting, always the difference in perspective when you're writing versus listening.
Yeah, and I'm never gonna hear my music in the same way that other people hear it. So sometimes you just gotta let go and like. And I was surprised that was the one that Drum and Bass Arena wanted to premiere. which I wouldn't have expected. I'm still confused about that, but
it's a great tune.
There you go.
But it's, yeah, as you said, it's melodically, it's like really strong. That
yeah, and it also has this sort of like, to me, it has sort of a Far East vibe, because I was listening to Japanese trip hop mix to write it. I don't know if other people will pick up on that, but I've never actually been to Asia, so what the fuck do I know?
Yeah, it's just a feeling. Yeah,
just a feeling.
Yeah. No, I really dig it. Was there a message behind like put your phone, not put your phone? This is the last time you're looking at your screen. Like, were you trying to convey something, or did it just kind of fit the vibe of, okay, now we're done with computers, we're gonna chill?
Yeah, I just find that, like, if you put away your screen and listen to music, like even if you're listening to Spotify, put away your screen and look out the window instead of staring at your screen. As like basic and stupid as that might sound, and you just get a completely different vibe. A lot of people in the clubs, they're like, you should put away your phone on the dance floor because it makes you look like a boring cunt.
Which is also
I wouldn't go that far personally. I can see both sides of it. Personally, I think if it's a party, people should be able to use their phone if they want, or they should put it away. If probably better to put it away, if I'm being honest.
Yeah.
I'm not so vigilant about that point, but I do think it's a beautiful idea to like if you go to a party in somewhere in Germany, you look around, like nobody's got their phone out. It's like such more of an underground vibe. And like, you don't really need to capture everything for social media, do you?
Yeah, no, definitely.
But I say that as a hypocrite because I'm filming on my phone sometimes. So trying to get away from that though.
Yeah, but you're definitely not a like social media guy, I think. Like from your like Instagram and stuff, there's like, besides releases, there isn't much.
Yeah, I do the Instagram story, but in terms of what I want to actually post, like I don't know what I want permanently on my Instagram. Like if I'm just doing something, like if I want to show you what I'm eating or whatever, that's something I only want up for 24 hours.
Yeah.
Who gives a shit? But yeah, sometimes I go through periods where I just have nothing to say on social media, and it's better to
say nothing.
I don't know, maybe you're supposed to be doing things every day, but I also think there's something to be said about a little bit of mystery surrounding an artist, and like not knowing everything about them is special. Like Caliber doesn't even have a social media presence. And we're not all Caliber. We can't get away with that.
No,
like sure. I need to do a lot more social media than he does because I'm not Caliber. But sometimes I just want to keep a little bit of mystery because to me it adds to the appeal of the music.
Yeah.
It also allows people to have their own interpretations. Like if I'm telling you what every track means, then it can be less special for the listener. Also, I don't like to post things while I'm working on them because people complain when it doesn't come out for 2 years, or also it might, like, until my tunes are finished, they sound a little bit rough. And like, I don't necessarily want people to hear like the raw early versions of my tunes necessarily, because I know that by the time it's finished, it's going to be way more polished. So, yeah, I mean, sometimes I just want to show people what I'm doing in the studio, but then I'm like, no, just keep it to yourself, and because I never know what I'm going to end up releasing anyway. So that's the other thing.
Yeah, no, and I like the fact that, like, around mystery, the fact also that there's a lot of, like, I don't know if it's restrained, but like, there's a lot of space between your releases, coming to your album, and then, like, now it's been a bit of time since your EP, and I'm waiting for the next one. But it's always good to have, I think, that time coupled with the mystery of like building up to something and then releasing it, rather than I don't know. Yeah, it depends.
Absolutely. On people. I'm glad you say that, but at the same time, as an artist, you feel pressure to release something all the time. I feel that the scene can forget about you. Like, if, for example, if I stopped releasing for 5 years, I would be forgotten completely. I would never DJ again. I feel like I've seen a lot of people who are like legends in drum and bass. Like 15 years ago, they stopped releasing, and they try to come back, and it can be very difficult. So like, I do feel I need to release something every year. Like I took 2019 off from releases while I was working on my album, and my DJ schedule really suffered, unfortunately. I think it was worth it because the album came out more special and I put more effort into it. And the tunes sounded more polished, and so I don't regret that. But like I did notice that like things kind of like suffered a bit when I wasn't releasing for a full year. So like, but it's hard because like at this point I only want to release something that's as good or better than what I've already done.
Yeah.
And like
that's getting harder.
It's getting harder because like I'm writing a lot of tunes that I think are pretty good, but I'm like, is this really all that great? Do I need to put this out into the world? And also like drum and bass, the whole shelf life of it moves so fast. It's something that came out at the beginning of this year, unless it's like truly special, a lot of people are gonna have forgotten about it.
Yeah.
So like I only want to put out my best music because I feel that it's gonna get forgotten about in 6 months anyway, unless it's like something that stands the test of time. And that can be really difficult because in this genre, there's so much stuff that comes out every week. Like the market is flooded with new music every week that it can be hard to really stand out, unfortunately.
Yeah, no, definitely. I don't know if it's the same. I'm only really familiar with drum and bass. If it's the same or worse in like techno or house, like do they have the same issues? But definitely in drum and bass, it's like there's so much stuff coming out. It's hard to keep up. And
yeah, I'm sure other genres have the same problem. But I feel like there's just a lot more artists in drum and bass than there ever used to be.
Which is a good thing, I guess.
It's a good thing, and like the democratization of music in the sense that like anybody can pick up Fruity Loops and just like on a cheap PC and make tunes, whereas like 20 years ago you needed to invest in a whole studio just to make ideas. So like the barrier of entry or whatever is a lot more that like anybody can just jump into it, and like YouTube tutorials, which I don't watch that often personally, but the younger people, they can figure out everything they need to know about making drum and bass in like a few weeks. So there's just a lot more music now as a result.
Yeah. Just slowly wrapping this up. Love this chat with you, man. Great meeting you.
Man.
I want to just close off with one topic. It's around nostalgia, because it's something I've been thinking about recently, and I feel your music is the closest I can relate to the term nostalgia. When you think about nostalgia and like Kodak Dreams, for example, looking at pictures, and does that evoke a sad feeling in you, or is it a happy feeling?
That's a great question. It's a mixture of melancholic and uplifting, and I feel that this is a theme in my music. Maybe other people would disagree, because like I always hear that my music is summertime uplifting music. To me, there's like a tinge of melancholy, and that's what I pick up on when I hear nostalgic music. Like even if it's like the stuff I like, even if it's uplifting, there's just this tinge of melancholy to it, or vice versa. If it's overwhelmingly melancholic, then there's a tinge of happy. Sort of like, I think the melancholy comes from the fact that these old songs, old melodies, they're often made by people who are no longer with us. They reflect a time that is long past, and like something sad about that, but also like funk and soul like are inherently these summertime kind of uplifting genres. I don't know. I just like the juxtaposition, I guess you would say, of like melancholic and uplifting. And I guess some of my tunes lean more towards one or the other. But I always just like to sort of capture that sort of contradiction of I don't know, happy and sad.
Yeah. No, I feel the same way, and it depends on the tracks. I think definitely in my personal life, like nostalgia was very much like a sad feeling. Like if I thought back to my childhood, I had a great childhood, but I'd be sad that it was over.
Yeah.
And now I don't know if it's because I'm becoming older, but now I reflect more with like gratitude and like grateful that it happened. So it's like nostalgia, but in a positive way. It's like this weird.
Even the shitty things that you've gone through, you probably came out on the other side. Like a better person, or like a stronger person. But also part of the melancholy of nostalgia, I think, is that like a lot of these tunes are about relationships and like love, and like it's usually a relationship that's long gone. So you're thinking both positively and negatively. Maybe it's a person you haven't talked to in 15 years, so that's kind of a melancholic idea. But just this longing for something from the past that's no longer currently in your life.
Yeah, no, definitely. I don't know why, but I think that's Botanical Life captures exactly that feeling for me.
Okay, beautiful.
That's why I love it. But it's been a pleasure talking with you, man. I really enjoyed
this
this
was a
one.
lot of fun.
Before we shut off, maybe let people know where they can check you out online, if you have any projects upcoming, things you want to disclose, anything at all.
I'm not ready to disclose what's coming next because even I don't know, if I'm honest. But the Newport Magnetic EP is out now on the North Quarter. We do like to send people to Bandcamp because, you know, it's like directly to the artist. And obviously I'm on Instagram, Twitter, SoundCloud, Facebook. I'm not really much of a Facebooker anymore. Who is? But yeah, go check out my Instagram stories and see what I'm eating in the hay. I live right by Chinatown, so always eating some interesting shit. Yeah, big up, man. This was a really nice talk, and keep doing what you're doing. I'm loving your podcasts, and yeah, thanks for having me.
Appreciate it. Yeah, we'll do it sometime soon when you have another project on the way.
For sure. We'll do it again.
Cheers, man.